Hey and welcome back, and welcome to this bonus lesson where we're going to fix our well. So as you can see, I'm back in the Blender project, and what I want to do is I want to add some plants or rocks or anything just to cover up this really hard edge of this well in the scene, because as you can see it doesn't look too natural to have that very hard edge there. So I'm back in Bridge, in Quixel Bridge, to download some of these grass elements. And let's maybe start with this one. I'm going to import this. Now you can obviously use Bridge as well, or Quixel, or you can download some grass elements from another website if you there's quite a few that you can use for that. So I'm just going to change this over to solid view, and now you can see we've got this little grass element there. So let's just zoom in here and maybe let's just do something here. So I'm going to scale it down a bit. And let's just select hierarchy, and then I'm going to duplicate this model and shift Z just to restrict it on the Z axis, scale it down, rotate it on the Z so it's not looking the same as all the other parts. And let's duplicate it one more time. Let's maybe move it this side, scale it up a bit, and let's rotate it. Let's have a look through the camera just to see what we need to cover up. So maybe if we go to the last frame, you can see we are kind of starting to cover that nicely. So let's see what else we can bring in. Maybe one of these as well. Let's bring that in. And let's just go into solid view and move this one into place. Maybe something like that. Let me just select it, maybe scale it down a bit, and let's duplicate it, move it to this side, rotate it so it's not the same, maybe scale it down a bit, and maybe one more. So let's see if I bring in this one, maybe let's bring that one in. So there we go. Let's look through the camera to see exactly where we need to cover. So maybe on this side, somewhere around here. Let's select everything there. Let's just zoom in here. Maybe let's duplicate this one right next to it, a little smaller, rotate around, and then one here at the back. So I'm going to duplicate it as well, maybe bigger, a little further away, and let's rotate that. Alright, let's see, maybe we can add one thing here as well. So I'm going to take one of these, duplicate it, move it right here, rotate it around, maybe place it there, and let's see how that looks like. Alright, so what we want to do is we want to render these grass elements and the shadow catcher on their own. So we're not going to render anything else in the scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable the character and objects collections. They will not render if you disable their collections. And let's just see what we can do here, because we might need the shadow on the well that the grass is actually causing. So what I'm going to do, let's go back into this objects collection, and I'm going to grab this well, I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm just going to move it out to our scene collection so we have that on its own layer, or kind of separate object. So now we can disable this objects collection again. And this time on this well, I'm going to go to the object properties, and we're going to set that as a shadow catcher. So now you can see that we're just getting the shadow that's being casted from the plants. So another thing that you can do here is just disable diffuse and glossy, the same as we did with the other shadow catchers. So now you can see we get that little bit of a shadow behind the grass. Let's see if I can zoom in here. You can kind of see it a bit better. So we just get those shadows that the plants are casting on the floor as well as on the well. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to frame 1. So now we want to go ahead and we want to render this out. So let's go to our render passes again, and this time I'm going to disable all of these direct, indirect, because we don't need that really. We're just going to use the combined render pass for this. I can leave ambient occlusion and shadow catcher, and also the cryptomat for object if we want to select these grass or these plants individually. We can use that. So the mist layer I'm gonna include as well, because we can apply some mist to that if we want to, and then obviously the combined layer as well. So let's go to our output properties, make sure that your frame range is correct, so from frame 1 to frame 150, and let's just give it a folder. So I'm going to go and just create a new folder and call this render underscore grass. Go in and let's just call this grass 1, and then put an underscore because it's going to add those frame numbers afterwards. Click on accept, and let's just double check our settings here at the bottom. So we're going to render an OpenEXR multi-layer and just a float, which is 16-bit, which is perfectly fine. Alright, so let's save our project, and now we can kick off the grass render. So once your project is saved, you can simply go to this render menu and then render animation, and this will obviously take some time because it's going to run through all 150 frames one at a time. It's going to save that EXR for us. So once this is done, I will see you in After Effects. Alright, so the render for our grass finished, so I'm back in After Effects. So let's load that EXR image sequence for the grass render around the well. So I'm simply going to double click, and I'm going to click on the first EXR for the grass render. Make sure you have OpenEXR sequence selected here at the bottom and click on open. Now the first thing we need to do is just check the frame rate of the sequence. So right click, interpret footage main, and then we're going to set this to the same as our footage, which is 25 frames per second, and now we can drag it into our comp. So I'm going to place this below the grade layer, so the CC and also the black bars. So just drag that below that, and then we need to add that extractor effect to extract those render passes. So let's load the extractor effect, and then I'm going to select the scene combined layer, and this will give us the grass. If I just solo this layer, you can see we have our grass in the scene. So I'm just going to rename this layer to grass. Yeah, that should be fine. So let's see how that looks. So I'm just going to kind of scrub through here and look at some of these layers. It's getting a little slow now, but you can see the grass is in the right position and it's obviously being tracked correctly. So I think that's looking great. So what I want to do first is let's bring in the ambient occlusion of the grass. So I'm simply going to duplicate this layer, this grass layer, and then I'm going to select the ambient occlusion pass from this extractor effect, and there you can see we've got the ambient occlusion only for the grass. And remember, we need to use an alpha from the combined. So let's just select the alpha layer for that one, and there you can see we've got the ambient occlusion. And now we need to change this from normal to multiply. Alright, let's just zoom in there and see what we have. So now you can see the grass is a little bit darker. So if I just toggle this ambient occlusion on and off, you can see what that's doing. You can obviously change the opacity of this layer by just pressing T, and then you can kind of play with that opacity of the ambient occlusion just to kind of tweak it how you want it to look. So I think something like that maybe works well. So I'm just going to rename this to grass AO for grass ambient occlusion. And then finally we still need the shadows. So I'm simply going to duplicate this grass layer again, place it below our grass, and this time we're going to select the shadow catcher. So let's just have a look there. So that's our shadow, and this one we also need to place on multiply. So now we can see we've got the nice shadow for the grass. So I'm just going to rename this to grass shadow, and obviously you can also bring up the opacity and kind of play with the opacity of that shadow to match the surrounding shadows, but I think 100% actually looks pretty good. Now one more thing that I want to do, the grass feels a little bit sharp if you look at the surrounding objects, so I want to add a subtle blur to our grass layer. So let's add a camera lens blur, and I'm gonna set this to, let's try 1. That already looks much better. So maybe we can even get away with 0.5. Let's have a look. So that's with no blur, and that's with the blur. So you just want to match the blurriness of the surrounding objects and also the surrounding footage. Maybe we can even bring this down to like 0.3. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. So now we don't see that harsh line around our well. I think that looks pretty good. So that's just an easy way to kind of hide any harsh lines or anything like that you can just place some grass or some plants or some weeds over it, and that will just kind of integrate that object into the scene much better. Alright, so let's have a look at the final render. So I'm just going to save this quickly, and then I'm going to export a render, and then let's have a look at it. Alright, so the render has finished, and let's have a look at our final result. Yeah, I think everything looks really good. Shadows are looking good. Yeah, so you can obviously go ahead and apply your own grade to this, see what you can come up with. And yeah, go ahead and save your After Effects project now, and I will see you in the conclusion video.